Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Russian army has provenly hit a new low now. We've seen already footage of Russians attacking Ukrainian positions on crutches, but now a video surfaced with something completely new. Yes, you are seeing it right. It's Russians just driving up to the front line and attacking Ukrainian positions straight from the wheelchairs and then slowly crawling towards Ukrainian positions. Now, this is obviously happening for various reasons. One reason is that these are the Russians that are just forced to the front lines by their commanders. There's plenty of stories. We can go into them at some point later on. But the fact is still a fact. This is what the Russian army is in 2025. And now there is a lot of discussions about the different negotiations and how they will bring peace, though I'm really mad sometimes because they are confusing ceasefire and peace altogether. But more importantly, this underscores one very specific thing, which is that the best peace negotiating team that Ukraine has right now is the Ukrainian armed forces. Thanks specifically to this and their work, we're seeing Russian military slowly but surely turning into the party of war that can be negotiated with. We're not there yet. Putin still believes that he has a massive army, but the footage on the ground that we've seen right now, it is still somewhat sparse. But as the more times goes by and more donkeys and these cripples attacking Ukrainian positions will be common, the more we're going to see Russian military degrade, and that will be the possibly best negotiated solution that Ukraine can achieve. So support the Ukrainian armed forces, trust the Ukrainian armed forces, because they're the best at negotiating with Russians in a way that they will understand. This is especially important as we're now talking about potentially Trump turning on Russia. I am very skeptical of this report, first and foremost. This is Trump we're talking about, so we shouldn't believe anything he says. Where is the crowd that was telling me that I shouldn't be critical of Trump and I should look at his actions rather than his words? So yes, all of the people that says like, what do you think about Trump now? Let's see, okay, let's see. So far, this has been only reported by like one journalist that she claimed that he called her and told her that he's supposedly very mad at Putin. And so far, it's been all vague, it's been unconcrete, and to be honest, the threats that he's making, they're very weak. In any case, I have not seen any confirmation that this is actually real. So for now, the only thing that Donald Trump actually did was hurt Ukraine and kill a lot of Ukrainians. And for that, he never will have any forgiveness, but he can try to make up for it. And so far, he hasn't even made one step towards that direction. In the meantime, Ukrainians are analyzing what the Russian plan for aggression is. And deputy commander of the Ukrainian intelligence, Skibitsky, actually came out and stated that Russia would like to end the war by 2026, that it would be the most realistic scenario. Russia right now is focusing on exhaustion of the Ukrainian military. They want to continue the pressure because right now Ukraine is in a little bit of a dip. I think Putin still wants United States to stop the weapons supply to Ukraine, and I think that Putin just wants to push without allowing Ukraine to recoup their strength, because Ukrainians are having less resources and it takes them a bit to respond to Russians. It is truly believed that Putin is misunderstanding the situation on the front line, especially when he talks about the Ukrainian troops being encircled. It's very clear that he doesn't see the full and accurate representation of the picture of the front line. I already showed you some of the videos about how the Russian storming units look like, and this has also been stated in actual data. There has been a nice analysis work that just came out from Fortifications together with other representatives from the OSINT community very close to Ukraine, and they basically counted some of the tanks and armored vehicles on the storage facilities and how it looked like, and updated their estimates. And just to show you in how bad of a state Russia is, because it is in a bad state. What I wanted to show you now, it is in Ukrainian, but I will leave a link in the description so you can go and at least you can read the text if you would like to know the details. What is happening right now is that Russian producers are dipping already in something that is named equipment graveyards. It's areas where the OSINT analysts have estimated that what is on those locations, it's like it's dead. Like it is dead. Like those things could not be salvaged at all. Yet Russians are even going now through some of those graveyards for equipment. The satisfactory conditions of tanks by the second half of 2025, it will be exhausted. Any kind of a suitable condition tanks will be exhausted. And from the second half of 2025, the main focus of restoration will shift to the T-62s and T-55s, which, although in poor condition already, like the 72s in storage, will be easier to restore when it comes to the need to restore virtually from scratch, because again, they're going into those graveyards. And restoration of equipment from graveyard is problematic because not only takes longer, it means that the price per unit rises up. It means that it takes more money, it costs more to produce any kind of a potential battle-capable unit that is both of poor quality and also takes longer to deliver. And it has been shown also on the production output lines. So here is a nice chart, which is the rate of recovery and production of tanks per year. And tanks are just representative of general Russian state of their military. So in 2022, Russia were able to put together about 1,500 tanks from the storage facilities. Majority of them were in relatively okay condition. By the 2023, they matched the level of the current annual expenditure of tanks in the war in Ukraine by Russians. So they were able to output about 1,100 tanks. By the end of 2024, that number basically halved to 600 tanks that Russia was able to put out, which is half less than what Russia needs to wage the war in a way that it's waging this war in Ukraine. And estimates are that by 2025 end, with all of the long-term production of tanks, with pulling them out from the storage bases, that Russia will be able to output only about 400 tanks, which is almost 3 times less than Russia actually needs to fight. Now, we're talking about storage bases, so that's why it's important to remember that those are what they are, the storage bases. Russia still has the tanks that are operational on the front lines. That's why we still see the tanks. But the main point that we're telling is that this show of these Ladas and everything, this is not happening because Russia is just growing stronger and stronger and stronger. This is happening because Russia is being more and more exhausted. They do have a lot of manpower. They do use a lot of these newer tactics. They do still use a lot of the aviation bombs, and there are developments on how to fight these aviation bombs. And Ukraine is struggling to keep up, and specifically struggling to find the ways to respond to Russia, just because the amount of resources that Russia has dedicated so far still is quite large. But the most important thing is, I think, is here. We've expect already that Russia will continue their advancing on the east, on the south, and other directions in Ukraine. However, Ukrainians are getting very much prepared. The Clement Molin does all the time good updates on the state of the defense fortifications of Ukraine. Here we see the sector of Pokrovsk. He stated that while Russia was stopped at Pokrovsk, Ukraine has set up layers after layers after layers of defense fortifications. He acknowledged that quality of those defense fortifications have been improving significantly. Especially, he's stating that now Ukrainians don't just make like one trench of anti-tank ditch. They're now making multiple anti-tank ditches as a protection. They're also setting up countless just firing in defensive positions, and most likely there's underground tunnel network that goes in between a lot of those fortifications. The density of these fortifications is quite high anywhere around Pokrovsk, so Ukrainians are preparing to defend areas around Pokrovsk and areas behind Pokrovsk. They are preparing to defend more and more and more and more. There are many new lines of fortifications that Ukrainians are setting up. So even if we say that Ukraine will not be able to accumulate the resources to counterpunch Russia, because one thing that Russian constant push, constant offensive on all front lines, while it is not allowing the classical thinking of Russian breakthroughs into the depth of Ukrainians, they are trying to put pressure on Ukraine long term, to collapse the morale of Ukrainian military, to make sure that Ukrainians always feel that they don't have enough resources to defend everywhere against Russians. So they try to attack, and never really stop. But Ukrainians are saying basically to this, okay, you want to fight? Let's fight. And they're prepping up to fight until the bitter end. And so far, it has worked wonders for Ukrainians. And Ukrainians didn't have such a dense fortifications, so they are adapting, they are preparing these fortifications, and they are ready to fight Russians and destroy Russians for as long as it takes. In some other news, French far-right politician Marine Le Pen, that was aiming to topple President Macron's rule in 2027, has now been found guilty of using EU funds for their own political campaign. And this is unfortunate because the court decision states that she cannot participate and run for elections for 5 years. A Paris court handed Le Pen, who was frontrunner for the next elections, a 4-year prison sentence with 2 years suspended to be served under house arrest and under 100,000 fine. Le Pen will file an appeal, though. The court ruled that Le Pen had used 4-party employees as parliamentary assistants, including her personal assistant and her bodyguard, misusing European funds for her own political party. So for now, let's hold our horses. The appeals process will still need to take place, but overall, it is a good signal. And remember, this is not because there cannot be right-wing politics in France. We are living in a political spectrum where different opinions are possible, but it is mostly because she is a big Kremlin stooge and she is not a good person at all. She would definitely sell out Europe and Ukraine to Putin nonstop. The only reason she was talking more or less okay-ish about Ukraine is because the social pressure and the public perception in France has been shifting, and her ties with Putin were just becoming a bit too toxic. But if you just look a little bit deeper, you find out that it was all for show. Another pundit of Putin that is right now sabotaging a lot of work being done in Europe is Orban, and the new incoming German government, especially Friedrich Merz, has stated that potentially we should exercise our possibilities of thwarting the influence that Hungary can have inside of European Union with a little bit more power. It was stated, quote, existing protective instruments from infringement proceedings and the withholding of EU funds, of the suspension of membership rights such as voting rights in the Council of the EU must be applied much more consistently than before. That was stated. Hungary was not mentioned, but it is very clear who exactly Merz had in mind here. So if the dice will land the way that we hope they will, then hopefully, finally, the reign of Hungary sabotaging the defense structures of Europe and single position that we could have against the Russians will finally come to an end, and we will see Hungary stop being this thorn in the side of democracies all across the continent. Then there is this crazy story that you should read, and I will leave a link to it below. We don't often talk about the cyber warfare that is ongoing across the world, actually, with Russia and Ukraine fighting. And here we see a case where 256 Cyber Assault Division and Informed Napal Group were able to work together and block the delivery of sanctioned equipment to Russia that was tried to do by the Russian limited liability company EMT, with the help from the Indian company Park Controls and Communications Private Limited. And they knew full well, this Indian company, that Russian company was sanctioned. So they tried to fool the French provider of equipment that everything was fine, like it's just equipment that will go to India. And more importantly, when a French company was then contacted by the guys from the cyber division and informed Napalm, they tried to downplay, they tried to get Russians essentially to send the equipment back to India so the French can come and check and see that the equipment is still in India. So they tried to basically double bullshit this whole argument. It's a crazy story. I really recommend you reading it, but the guys were able to find all of the details of this deal. And this is important because this equipment is something that Russia cannot just do on its own. We talked time and time again that Russia has troubles with high precision equipment. And what was really discussed here is the IR-CAL, and sorry for the pronunciation, test bench is a test equipment dedicated to the characterization and performance validation of any electro-optical system, visible in the SWIR cameras, night vision devices, thermal imagers, laser rangefinders, and multi-axis sighting devices. So there was a scheme to get this specific calibration and testing bench to make sure that their thermal and night vision devices work for the Russian equipment, mostly for tanks or drones or whatever else. And this was stopped thanks to Ukrainian information fighters. So props to them. Read the article. And finally, something that I feel it needs to be said a lot. This is coming from the Baltic states, but it's also coming from me personally, is that we hear a lot of rhetoric right now from the Western Europe about their participation on Russia and their tough stance. But the Baltic countries have been telling that for decades that Russia should not be trusted. Therefore, there is a lot of skepticism within these countries, and myself included, when it comes to the Western European countries. And I'm just going to quote what's been said here, that unfortunately, historically, Europe's defense initiatives have often been limited to a mere discussions or overambitious and controversial plans for European army without substantial practical implementation, the Lithuanian diplomat added. Unless you pay for something, then it's just a lot of rhetoric, said the Estonian former president Thomas Hendrik Ilves, pointing out to the fact that France, among others, blocked the EU's planned 40 billion euros military aid package to Ukraine. And they're rightly worried because what they're asking is essentially, if you're stating something, then please follow it up with the action. Because another glaring fact is that France, a military powerhouse and the EU's second largest economy, committed only some 0.18% of its GDP in bilateral aid and 0.34% under the EU auspices to Ukraine over the whole 3 years of war. Moreover, if Lithuania spends 5%, and this is a quote, of GDP on defense because we're worried that Russian President Vladimir Putin will come for us, and Belgium spends 2.1% of its GDP because they're not worried because there's a lot of ground between the Belgium and the Baltic states, it means that it will be on Lithuania's school and roads and police that will suffer, Landsbergis told Kyiv Independent. But what we are really defending is Europe. We will be defending Belgium as well, the foreign minister added when discussing European defense spending plans, underlying the important point that yes, it is important obviously for Baltics to spend more on defense because they're on the front lines against Russia. But if we are as a common market, if we are as a common entity, Europe, then maybe we should also consider as a survival and security of the entity, not each country for themselves. So while the European states are discussing who supports Europe, who doesn't, who should be left with or without the vote on any kind of European matters, we here are doing our part, and I want to extend my thanks to everyone that contributed to the drone swarm campaign for the trucks to Ukrainian defenders. This will be a great boon, and I am forever grateful to you for it. And also people that reached out to me asking about the defense investments for the European companies. I will get back to you. There were a couple of things that I needed to verify before for the procedure and what I can share, what I can't. But I will get to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching this. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and we'll see you next time.